Welcome back to the deep dive. Tonight we're stepping back into the shadows of Villisca, Iowa, and those infamous axe murders. Last time we looked pretty closely at Reverend Kelly, didn't we?
We did. A very disturbing possibility.
Yeah.
But tonight we're shifting gears, exploring a different path, maybe a colder one.
Yeah, definitely colder. We're drawing heavily from Villisca, a grudge carved in blood, specifically episode 3. And this source points towards a motive that feels less like, I don't know, sudden madness and more calculated.
Calculated is a good word for it. The material really lays out an argument centered on things like deep-seated pride, public humiliation, and a profound sense of betrayal. It asks us to consider if this wasn't random at all.
Exactly. Was it a targeted hit? Did someone order this horrific event? Or was it maybe fueled by years of simmering resentment just waiting to boil over? That's what we want to get into tonight. So let's start at the beginning of this particular thread with Josiah Moore, Joe Moore.
Right, Joe Moore. He's absolutely central to this theory. The source paints him as, a pretty significant figure in Villisca around 1903 when he started working for Frank Fernando Jones.
And Jones ran the big implement store in town, right? A major business.
Very major business. And Moore wasn't just clocking in and out. He was good. Very good. The source calls him Jones's star salesman. Apparently, he had a real talent for it, connecting with farmers, understanding what they needed.
So he wasn't just selling plows, he was building relationships, building the business itself. The source suggests he was key in making Jones's store a regional force, not just a local shop.
Absolutely. He helped Jones expand significantly. But Moore was also ambitious, and that's where the trouble really starts to brew, according to this narrative.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, by 1907, after about 4 years of being Jones's top guy, Moore makes a huge move. He quits.
Okay, people quit jobs.
Sure, but he didn't just quit. He immediately set up his own implement store. Right there in Villisca, the Moore Implement Company, a direct competitor.
Okay, now I see where this is going. That's bold.
It's incredibly bold, especially in a small town like Villisca back then. But it gets worse, from Jones's perspective. Moore didn't just open a rival shop. He took the customers with him.
Oh, wow. Not just any customers, I bet.
No, the source is specific. He apparently persuaded some of Jones's biggest, most important clients to switch allegiance. The prime example mentioned is the John Deere account. That was a huge deal, losing John Deere. That wasn't just losing sales, that was losing prestige.
You take someone's star salesman, and then that salesman takes your biggest account. In a small town where everyone knows everyone's business.
Exactly. The source doesn't mince words. It calls it war. Not just business rivalry. This was personal, public, and deeply humiliating for Frank Jones.
So let's talk about Jones, Frank Fernando Jones. He wasn't just some shopkeeper, was he?
Not at all. He was a pillar of the community. A powerful businessman, yes, but also politically influential, a former state senator. He was accustomed to respect, to being, the top dog in town.
And suddenly, his former protege is not only competing with him, but seemingly winning, taking away his prize accounts. The source talks about the embarrassment.
Yeah, the sheer embarrassment for Jones must have been immense. And the source suggests there was constant talk, whispers about the betrayal, about how Moore had stabbed his former mentor in the back. And that kind of close-knit society reputation was everything.
And the personal relationship, did they manage to stay civil?
Apparently not. The source mentions reports that the two men reached a point where they wouldn't even speak to each other if they passed on the street. Just icy silence. Imagine that tension hanging over the town for years.
Years of this. Wow. Okay, so you have this simmering resentment, this public humiliation, this business war.
And this leads, according to the source material and Detective Wilkerson's theory, to a very dark place. The idea that Jones, this powerful, respected man, might have decided he couldn't beat Moore in business, so he'd find another way.
A more permanent way.
A much more permanent way. But perhaps not directly. The theory isn't that Jones picked up the axe himself, it's that he outsourced the problem.
Which brings us to this other figure mentioned in the source, someone maybe overlooked sometimes, William Mansfield.
William Blackie Mansfield. Yes, the source introduces him as a potentially crucial piece of this puzzle. He's described as, well, a drifter, a transient figure, but one with some very dark rumors attached to his name.
Dark rumors like?
Like being involved in other axe murders. Several of them, across the Midwest, not just Villisca. The source presents him as this shadowy character moving from place to place, possibly leaving incredible violence behind him.
And the source draws specific parallels, right, to other crimes.
It does, quite explicitly. It points to axe murders that happened just the year before Villisca in 1911, Paola, Kansas. and then Shelbyville and Mattoon, Illinois. And the details. They're chillingly similar.
What kind of similarities are we talking about?
The whole MO, the method. Entire families attacked and killed while they slept. The weapon, always an axe, left behind at the scene. And then these strange details, like covering the mirrors in the house. It's a very specific, very brutal pattern.
An axe left behind, families murdered in their sleep, covered mirrors across multiple states. That really does sound like a signature.
It certainly caught the attention of investigators at the time, particularly Detective James Wilkerson. He was with the Burns Detective Agency, a well-known private firm.
And Wilkerson looked at this pattern, looked at the situation in Villisca between Moore and Jones, and put two and two together.
That's exactly the theory the source explores. Wilkerson became convinced that Frank Jones had hired William Mansfield to kill Josiah Moore. The motive, purely business. Eliminate the rival, reclaim the market, maybe even get back those lucrative accounts like John Deere.
A straight-up contract killing, motivated by greed and revenge.
That's the core of Wilkerson's theory, as presented. But it also includes a crucial tragic twist, which the source mentions. Wilkerson believed the original plan was just for Moore. A clean, efficient, and specific job, as the source dramatizes his thinking. But something went terribly wrong that night.
Something went wrong. Like what?
Like the presence of the entire Moore family, plus the two Stillinger girls who were visiting. Wilkerson speculated, according to the source, that maybe the killer was interrupted, or maybe panic set in, or perhaps the instructions were brutally simple. Leave no witnesses.
Yeah.
The result was the massacre of everyone in the house.
So the children, the other adults, they might not have been the original targets at all, just collateral damage in the most horrific sense.
That's the grim implication of Wilkerson's theory presented in the source, that the job expanded horrifically beyond its initial, already terrible scope. It's a chilling thought that their deaths were almost incidental to the main goal.
God, you can only imagine how a theory like that landed in Villisca. Jones was a powerful man.
It split the town right down the middle. The source describes it vividly. People took sides. Some absolutely believed Jones was capable of it, pointing to the business feud, maybe personal grudges they knew about. They saw Wilkerson's theory as plausible.
And the others?
Others staunchly defended Jones. Couldn't believe a man of his standing, a former senator, could be involved in something so monstrous. They perhaps saw Wilkerson as an outsider, stirring up trouble, maybe even trying to frame an innocent man. It created deep divisions.
What did Jones himself do? Did he just ignore it?
Publicly, he denied everything, vehemently, said he had nothing to do with it. But privately, the source notes he hired lawyers pretty quickly after these suspicions started swirling.
Which, you could argue, is what anyone would do if falsely accused, or what someone guilty might do.
Exactly, it's ambiguous. But it shows he was taking the accusations seriously, whether out of fear of being framed or fear of being caught. The key thing, though, is what the source stresses. Despite Wilkerson's investigation, despite the rumors and the town being divided,
He was never arrested.
never arrested, never charged. There wasn't enough concrete, legally admissible evidence to bring a case against Frank Jones. But that suspicion, it hung over him for the rest of his life.
Let's circle back to Mansfield for a second. The source mentions those other 1911 murders, again, Paola, Kansas, and Colorado Springs this time.
Yes, it revisits those to reinforce the pattern. The similarities in the method, the signature as you called it, across Villisca and these other locations. It builds the case that Mansfield could have been a serial killer, or at least someone who used this specific brutal method multiple times.
Was he ever caught for those other crimes?
He was actually arrested briefly in connection with the Illinois murders the source mentions, but he was released. Again, lack of definitive proof connecting him directly, it seems.
So despite this pattern, this string of incredibly similar, brutal family murders, he walks free.
It seems so, which, again, feeds into that suspicion mentioned in the source. Was he just incredibly lucky, or was he perhaps protected? Was he really just hired muscle, as the source suggests, some believed, a disposable tool for someone else's dirty work? It's unsettling.
Okay, but Wilkerson didn't give up, did he? The source mentions he came back years later, around 1917, claiming he did find physical evidence.
That's right. Years after the murders, Wilkerson made a pretty bold claim. He said he had uncovered tangible proof linking Mansfield to the Moore house.
Like, what kind of proof? This sounds like it could be the smoking gun.
According to the source, Wilkerson claimed he had fingerprint evidence. No, fingerprinting was still relatively new then, but he claimed he had prints from the scene that matched Mansfield. He also mentioned hair samples and even an axe allegedly found with Mansfield that he believed was connected to another murder.
Fingerprints, hair, an axe. That sounds pretty solid. Why didn't that lead to a conviction?
Well, here's the problem. The source explains that when this evidence was presented or attempted to be used, it ran into legal hurdles. It was deemed circumstantial by the courts.
Circumstantial, even fingerprints.
The standards of evidence, the way it was collected and preserved back then, the scientific validation, it just wasn't what it is today. Apparently, the courts didn't find it conclusive enough to meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. The chain of custody might have been questioned, the matching techniques rudimentary. It just didn't hold up legally.
So the potential breakthrough just fizzled out due to the legal and scientific limitations of the time?
Essentially, yes. The evidence was ruled inadmissible. Mansfield remained free regarding Villisca. And then things took another turn. Frank Jones, perhaps feeling emboldened or just wanting to shut Wilkerson down for good, sued him.
Jones sued the detective. For what?
Defamation. Jones sued Wilkerson for damaging his reputation with these persistent accusations.
Wow, that must have caused quite a stir.
Oh, absolutely. The source calls it a media circus. You had the former senator suing the determined detective over these horrific murder accusations. It brought everything back into the spotlight, probably generated a lot of headlines, but likely didn't bring anyone closer to the actual truth.
Just more noise, more speculation, more division.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the end, the Villisca Axe murders remained officially unsolved. Despite Wilkerson's efforts, despite the compelling patterns, despite the lawsuit, no convictions, just lingering questions and theories.
Which brings us to a really tough question the source raises. If this theory is true, if Jones did orchestrate this, what kind of person does that? Hiring someone to kill a business rival is one thing, but the whole family, including 6 children.
It's a deeply disturbing thought. The source forces you to confront that psychological abyss. Was Jones, if involved, a complete sociopath? Someone utterly devoid of empathy, capable of ordering the deaths of children simply to regain a business advantage?
Or could it be, as Wilkerson speculated, that it wasn't supposed to go that far? That Jones perhaps ordered the hit on Moore, and the killer, Mansfield or whoever it was, took it upon themselves to eliminate everyone else?
That's the other possibility the source explores. Maybe Jones gave the order for Moore, and the horrific escalation was entirely on the killer. Maybe Mansfield, if it was him, was driven by his own rage, bloodlust, or madness, as the source speculates. Maybe seeing the family being potentially discovered just unleashed something terrible in him that went beyond any instructions.
It doesn't make Jones innocent of ordering a murder, but it paints a slightly different, perhaps even more chaotic and terrifying picture of the night itself.
It does. It adds another layer of horror, the idea that the plan, however evil, might have been eclipsed by an even greater, more spontaneous explosion of violence.
And all these years later, the house itself, the Moore house, it still carries that weight, doesn't it? The source talks about it being a museum now, but also something more.
Yes, it's described as a museum, a historical site, but also a shrine to the victims. And for many people, undeniably a haunting. It's a place people visit not just for history, but because they feel something there.
What do people report feeling?
The source mentions a common feeling reported by visitors, a heaviness, an oppressive atmosphere, deep sadness. And then there are the more specific claims, particularly from paranormal investigators.
Right, the ghost hunters.
Yeah.
What does the source say they've found or claim to have found?
It details numerous reports over the years. Investigators claiming to have recorded disembodied voices on audio recorders, EVPs. Others report seeing shadows moving, objects shifting position on their own, doors opening or closing, cold spots. The whole range of phenomena often associated with hauntings.
And the source mentions something particularly unsettling about children.
Yes. One of the most persistent and, frankly, heartbreaking claims is the sound of children's laughter being heard in the house when no children are present.
Oh, that's incredibly chilling. Laughter in that house.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the source leaves you with that question. What is that? Is it, as it puts it, an echo of innocence loss? Some kind of residual energy from the children who died there? Or is it something else, maybe a sign of the town's own inability to find peace? The unrest lingering because the crime was never truly solved?
It's a powerful, haunting question. And it circles back to this whole theory we've been discussing tonight. The powerful man, Jones. The bitter betrayal by Moore. The potential hired gun, Mansfield, with his alleged pattern of violence. It's a narrative that fits together in a disturbingly logical, if horrifying, way.
It does offer a coherent, albeit unproven, explanation rooted in very human, if very dark, motivations. Greed, pride, revenge. Unlike some other theories, it provides a clear why, even if the who and how remain legally ambiguous.
So the source really lays out this compelling case based on Wilkerson's investigation and the known facts of the rivalry, and then it kind of turns it over to us, to you listening.
Yes. It ends this line of thought by asking directly, what do you think? After hearing about the business war, the personalities involved, Mansfield's alleged history, Wilkerson's claims, does the Frank Jones theory hold water for you? It's a question that Villisca historians and enthusiasts still debate endlessly.
And it's a heavy one to leave hanging. We've definitely explored a very dark path tonight. We'll pause on this specific theory here. But we are far from done with Villisca. Next time on The Deep Dive.
We're going to lean into that haunting aspect we just touched upon. We'll move away from the whodunit in the earthly sense and delve much deeper into the paranormal claims surrounding the Moore house.
Yeah, we're going to really explore what the investigators, the psychics, the visitors have reported over the decades. We're hoping to even share some of the audio recordings people claim to have captured inside those EVPs, maybe even the reported children's voices, if we can find credible examples.
We'll look at why the house has gained such a reputation as one of America's most haunted locations. What feeds that legend? Is it just the tragedy, or is there something more?
It promises to be, well, unsettling, I imagine, exploring the possibility that something or someone from that night might still linger. So please join us then as we continue our deep dive into the chilling, unsolved mystery of the Villisca Axe Murders.